They say you can measure a man by who fears him. By how many men stand when he walks into a room. By how quickly the conversation dies. By how fast people look away. Seo Mu-jin had all of that. Every room he entered went quiet. Every man he looked at looked away first. Every enemy he ever had eventually stopped being a problem. In the underworld of Seoul, they didn't call him by his name. They called him Yong, the dragon. And on this particular Tuesday night, cold, wet, the kind of rain that empties streets and drives even brave men indoors, the dragon was walking home through a narrow alley in Hongdae. His suit was perfect. His shoes were dry under a black umbrella. Two of his most trusted men followed 3 steps behind, as they always did. Quiet. Careful. Eyes scanning the darkness the way you do when you work for someone the darkness itself respects. Everything was as it always was. Under control. Precise. And then he saw the old man, sitting on the wet ground, back against a cold brick wall, clothes thin and worn through, a wooden stick across his lap, rain falling on him like it fell on everything else, without mercy, without exception. His eyes were open, but they saw nothing. Blind. Mu-jin slowed. He didn't know why. He had walked past 100 men like this. 1,000, maybe. Men broken by the city, forgotten by the city, swallowed whole by the city. He had never stopped. Never looked twice. But something about this old man made his feet hesitate. Maybe it was the stillness of him. Because while the rain fell, and the wind moved through the alley, and the city roared in the distance, the old man was perfectly still. Not broken. Not afraid. Not performing. Just present. Mu-jin reached into his coat pocket without thinking, pulled out a coin, tossed it, without stopping, without looking, without needing anyone to see him do it. The coin landed in the old man's cup with a small, quiet clink. And then, the old man smiled. Not the desperate smile of someone grateful for charity. Not the performance of a beggar trying to earn more. A real smile. Slow. Warm. Deep. The kind that comes from somewhere very old inside a person. He tilted his head. And he spoke. Slow down here. Every word separated. Whoever you are. Mu-jin kept walking. Your heart. His steps slowed. Is good. He stopped. In 32 years, through blood and betrayal and the building of an empire that made grown men tremble, not one single person had ever said those words to him. Not one. The last person who had was his mother. And she had been dead for 32 years. Voice drops to barely above a whisper. Seo Mu-jin Yong, the dragon of Seoul, stood in the rain. And something moved behind his eyes that he had not felt since he was 8 years old. This is that story. Seo Mu-jin did not build his empire with noise. He built it with patience. With silence. With the kind of stillness that makes other men nervous. Because when a dangerous man goes quiet, you never know what he's decided. By 43, he controlled more of Seoul's underworld than any man before him. Not through chaos. Not through cruelty alone. Through precision. Everything in his world ran like a machine. Meetings kept, debts collected, problems solved before they became problems. His lieutenants didn't just respect him. They were afraid of the version of him they had never seen. When he walked into a room, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Not because anyone told them to. Because the air changed. Because something in the way he moved, unhurried, inevitable, reminded every man present of exactly how replaceable they were. He wore a gold watch on his left wrist. He never checked it in meetings. That was the point. He didn't need to know what time it was. Everyone else did. His empire stretched across 3 districts. Hospitality. Logistics. Debts that never appeared on paper but were always paid. Men with titles and offices and clean hands called him quietly, privately, when they needed things the law couldn't give them. He gave. And they owed. That was the architecture of his world. Favors and fear, stacked carefully, maintained obsessively. And at the top of all of it, a penthouse apartment on the 41st floor. Floor-to-ceiling glass. The whole city below him, spread out like something he had conquered, because he had. Every night, the same thing. One glass of whiskey. One chair facing the window. A dining table that seated 12. Set for one. He had everything a man could take by force. And not one thing that could be given. But he was not always the dragon. Once, he was just a boy. A boy named Mu-jin, who lived in a small apartment in Mapo district with his mother and a cold that never quite left the walls, no matter what season it was. His mother's name was Kong Soon-hee. She was not a remarkable woman by the world's measure. No title. No money. No one who would remember her name in a history book. But to Mu-jin, she was everything. She worked 2 jobs. Dishes at a restaurant during the day. Office floors at night. She came home past midnight smelling of bleach and cold water, her hands cracked at the knuckles, her shoulders carrying a weight that never fully set down. And still, she always checked on him first. Always sat on the edge of his bed, even when she could barely keep her eyes open, and asked him about his day like his answer was the most important thing she had heard all week. She used to cup his face in both hands. Those rough, tired hands. And say, "You're not like them, Mu-jin. Your heart is good." He didn't fully understand it then. He just knew it made him feel seen. She died when he was 11. A cold that turned to pneumonia. A pneumonia she ignored for 2 weeks because she couldn't afford to stop working. By the time she finally collapsed, it was too late. At the funeral, people cried. Mu-jin did not. He stood at her graveside in shoes that were too small and a jacket borrowed from a neighbor, and he made a decision so quietly that no one around him even noticed. Never again. Never powerless. Never soft. Never the boy standing at a graveside with borrowed shoes and nothing he could do. He kept that promise. For 32 years. He kept it perfectly. The meeting had gone well. It always did. Mu-jin gathered his coat, said nothing to the men who had spent 3 hours trying to impress him, and walked out into the night before anyone thought to offer him an umbrella. He had one already. Black. Precise. Like everything else he owned. It was late, past midnight, and the rain had been falling since early evening, the kind of rain that doesn't announce itself loudly but simply commits. Steady. Patient. Relentless. The streets were mostly empty. He preferred them that way. His 2 lieutenants, Min-suk and Dae-ho, fell into place behind him without a word. 3 steps back. Always 3. Close enough to be useful. Far enough to give him the silence he required. He took his usual shortcut through the back alley behind Hongdae station. Narrow. Borlili. The kind of place most people avoided at this hour. Most people. He had walked this alley 100 times. Nothing in it had ever made him pause. Until tonight. He saw the old man from several meters away. Sitting on the ground, back pressed against the brick wall, legs folded, a worn wooden stick resting across his lap. His clothes were thin. Far too thin for a night like this. Rain had soaked through them completely. But he wasn't shivering. He wasn't hunched. He wasn't holding out a hand or calling out or doing any of the things people in his position usually did. He was simply sitting. Still. Quiet. As if the rain, the cold, the darkness, the lateness of the hour. None of it applied to him. His eyes were open, pointed slightly upward. Seeing nothing. And yet, there was something in his face. Not emptiness. Not defeat. Something that looked, impossibly, almost like peace. Mu-jin's steps slowed. He didn't decide to slow them. They just did. And for reasons he could not have explained to any man alive. He didn't look away. He didn't stop walking. He told himself that later, that he hadn't stopped. That it was nothing. A reflex. The automatic response of a man passing someone with less. His hand moved to his coat pocket. Fingers closed around a coin, a single 501 piece, small and unremarkable, and without breaking stride, without looking down, without making anything of it. He tossed it. It caught the dim light for just a moment, then landed in the old man's cup with a sound so small it was almost nothing. Almost. Deoksu's hands moved to the cup slowly, unhurried, the way blind hands always move, not reaching but arriving. His fingers closed around the coin and lifted it. He held it, turned it once, felt the edges, the weight, something in the temperature of it, the way it had been carried. Mu-jin was already 2 steps past him. 3. Then the old man tilted his head, not toward the sound, not toward the footsteps, toward something else entirely, something only he could hear. And he smiled. That same smile, slow, real, deep, the one that had no performance in it whatsoever. And he spoke, quietly, without urgency, without agenda, as simply as a man stating the weather. Whoever you are. Mu-jin's left foot came down. Your heart. His right foot lifted, and did not fall. Is good. The rain kept falling. Somewhere distant, a car moved through a puddle. The city continued, indifferent, the way cities always do. But in that narrow alley, in that precise moment, something stopped. Not time, not the world, just him.
Seo Mu-jin,
the dragon of Seoul. The man no one looked at twice without flinching, standing completely still in the rain, because a blind old man with nothing had just said the only 4 words in the world that could reach him. He turned around. He didn't decide to. His body had been making decisions without him since the moment he first slowed his steps, and it made this one too. He walked back. Min-suk and Dae-ho watched without moving, without speaking. Something in the way their boss was carrying himself told them, clearly, instinctively, that this was not a moment that welcomed company. So they stayed back. And they watched. Mu-jin stopped in front of the old man. He looked at him for a moment, this small, rain-soaked figure sitting on cold pavement with the patience of someone who had long since made peace with cold pavement. Then he crouched down. Right there. On the wet ground. His trousers, tailored, expensive, the kind that required a particular dry cleaner in Gangnam, soaked through instantly. He didn't notice. Or he noticed, and didn't care. Which, for a man like him, was the same thing. He studied the old man's face up close now. The deep lines. The white beard. The clouded eyes pointing gently skyward, seeing nothing, missing nothing. And quietly, so quietly that Min-suk 3 steps away could not hear it, he asked. Asterisk, how do you know? Asterisk. Deoksu didn't startle. Didn't shift. As if he had been expecting the question since the coin landed. He tilted his head slightly, the way he always did when he was listening past the surface of things. And he answered. Asterisk, I cannot see your face. I cannot see what you're wearing or what you drive or how many men follow you. Asterisk. Asterisk, I only hear how a man walks. And I feel how a man gives. Asterisk. His thumb moved gently across the coin. Asterisk, you gave without stopping. Without looking. Without waiting to see if anyone noticed. Asterisk. He turned his face, those unseeing eyes, directly toward Mu-jin. Asterisk, that is not the giving of a man performing kindness. Asterisk. Asterisk, that is the giving of a man who still has kindness left. Asterisk. Asterisk, whatever the world has done to you, and I think it has done much, it did not reach that part. Asterisk. Asterisk, your heart is good. Asterisk. Mu-jin did not move, did not speak, did not look away. For the first time in 32 years, someone was looking directly at him. Not at the empire. Not at the reputation. Not at the dragon. At him. And it was the most terrifying thing he had ever felt. The words found something. Something small and very old, buried so deep and so long ago that he had almost convinced himself it wasn't there anymore. Almost. He was no longer in the alley. Not entirely. Part of him was standing in a different cold, a different dark, a narrow apartment in Mapo district, where the walls held winter no matter the season, and the only warm thing in the whole building was the woman who came home past midnight smelling of bleach. He was 8 years old. He had done something that day, some small errand for a neighbor, carried boxes, swept a stairwell, and saved enough to buy one bowl of Seoul from the pojangmaka at the end of the street. He wrapped it in his school sweater to keep it warm. Then he sat by the door and waited. She came in just after midnight, shoulders low, eyes tired in the way that went beyond sleep, the kind of tired that accumulates over years and never fully leaves. She saw the bowl on the table. She stopped. And then she crossed the room and crouched in front of him and took his face, his small, serious face, in both her hands. Those hands, cracked at the knuckles, rough from cold water and long hours. The gentlest thing he had ever felt. "Mu-jin," she whispered. Her eyes were glistening. "Your heart is good." He hadn't known then how few times she had left to say it. 3 years later she was gone. Pneumonia. 2 weeks of ignored symptoms. A body that had given everything it had and was simply done. At the funeral he stood very straight. He did not cry. He had already decided. Stone does not cry. Stone does not need. Stone does not stand at a graveside in borrowed shoes, helpless, watching the only person who ever truly saw him be lowered into the ground. He would become something the world could not do that to. He would become inevitable. He had kept that promise. Every single day for 32 years. He had kept it. Until a blind man in an alley said 5 words. And 32 years collapsed like paper in the rain. He came back to the alley slowly. The way you surface from deep water, not all at once, but in stages. The rain first. Then the cold. Then the brick wall, the wet pavement, the old man still crouching in front of him with that unbearable stillness. Mu-jin had not moved. He was still crouched on the ground, his ruined trousers soaking through, his umbrella forgotten at an angle that no longer sheltered anyone. Something was happening behind his eyes. Not a collapse. Not a breaking. Nothing so dramatic as that. This was quieter. More dangerous. The way a fracture moves through stone, not with noise, but with a slow, silent certainty that the structure will never again be exactly what it was. His jaw tightened. A muscle flickered once in his cheek. His throat closed around something he had no name for anymore, had not needed a name for in 32 years, and held it there, the way you hold a door shut against a wind that is stronger than you expected. He held it. He almost kept it. Almost. One tear. Just one. It formed at the corner of his left eye with no drama whatsoever. No trembling lip. No sharp intake of breath. It simply arrived. The way things arrive when they have been waiting long enough. It rolled down his cheek. And the rain took it before it reached his jaw. 3 steps behind him, Min-suk saw it. He said nothing. He would never say anything. But he saw it. And beside him, Dae-ho, 10 years of service, a man who had watched his boss walk through fire without blinking, looked at the ground. Because some moments are not meant to be witnessed. They are only meant to be survived. The dragon of Seoul crouched on wet pavement in a back alley. And for one single, private, devastating moment. He was just a boy. He stood up. Not quickly. Not with the fluid authority he usually moved with. Slowly. The way a man stands when his legs have remembered they are carrying more than a body. He straightened his jacket. A habit. Something to do with his hands. He reached into his inner coat pocket, past the phone, past the folded documents, and found what he was looking for. A plain white card. No name. No title. No emblem of any empire. Just a number. He held it for a moment. Then he reached down and placed it, carefully, deliberately, into Deok-soo's open hand, pressing it gently into the old man's fingers until he felt them close around it. "Call that number tomorrow morning," he said quietly. His voice was even. Controlled. Almost. "Tell them the dragon sent you." They will find you somewhere dry to sleep. Food every day. A doctor who will actually come to you. Deok-soo said nothing immediately. He held the card the way he had held the coin, feeling it, reading it in the language available to him, turning it slowly between his fingers. Then he looked up. Those clouded eyes. Pointing not quite at Mu-jin's face, but close enough. Close enough. I don't know who you are, he said softly. But your mother would be proud. The breath left Mu-jin's body without permission. Not loudly. Not visibly, to anyone watching from a distance. Just gone. A single, silent exhale that took something with it. He stood there for one more second. One. Then he turned. And he walked. Not fast. Not slow. But forward. Away. Before the old man could say anything else. Before Min-suk or Dae-ho could see what was happening to the edges of his face. The alley swallowed him. The rain closed around him. And behind him, Deok-soo sat in the dark, holding a card he could not read, smiling like a man who already knew exactly what it said. Min-suk watched his boss disappear around the corner. He stood very still for a moment after. The way you stand after witnessing something you don't yet have words for. Something that will take days, maybe weeks, to fully understand. In 10 years of service, he had seen Seo Mu-jin do things that should have been impossible for a human being. He had watched him sit across a table from men who wanted him dead and finish his tea without setting it down. He had watched him make decisions that would devastate lives with the same expression another man might use to check the weather. He had watched him walk away from violence, from chaos, from things that broke other men in half. Without a single crack showing. Not once. Not ever. Until tonight. It wasn't the tear that stayed with Min-suk. It was the walk. The way his boss had moved away from that alley, still straight, still deliberate, still carrying every ounce of the authority he had spent a lifetime building. But different. Something in the weight of him had shifted. Something invisible and fundamental. Like a man who has been holding his breath for 32 years and has just, quietly, privately, without telling anyone, let a little of it go. Min-suk looked back at the old man. Deok-soo was still sitting exactly as he had been. Rain falling on him without apology. The white card held in both hands, fingers moving gently across its surface as if reading something that wasn't there in ink. Still smiling. He didn't know about the empire. The fear. The 3 districts, the favors, the men who disappeared. He didn't know that the person who had crouched in front of him was the most dangerous man in Seoul. He only knew what he had heard. 4 footsteps slowing in an alley. 1 coin given without performance. A man walking like someone who had been carrying grief for so long he had forgotten it wasn't supposed to be this heavy. And a heart. Buried deep, armored over, walled off from the entire world. That had never, despite everything it had survived, gone cold. That was enough. For Deok-soo. That was everything. 3 days later, a phone call was made. No name given. No explanation offered. Just an address in Mapo district and an instruction, quiet, final, non-negotiable, that the apartment be ready by morning. Furnished. Warm. A doctor's number on the kitchen table. The person who received the call knew better than to ask questions. They always did. And so Deok-soo, blind beggar, forgotten man, the one who sat in the rain as if the rain didn't apply to him, moved into a warm apartment in Mapo district. The same neighborhood where, 40 years ago, a boy kept a bowl of soup warm in his school sweater. He never learned the name of the man who arranged it. He never needed to. Seo Mu-jin never spoke of that night again. Not to Min-suk. Not to anyone. It was filed away in the same place he kept everything that was too real to be useful, locked, silent, unreachable. Or so he told himself. But the people around him noticed something they couldn't name. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would make the papers or change the empire or soften the fear that followed him into every room. Just something in the way he moved through the world. A little less like a machine. A little more like a man who had remembered, somewhere deep and private, that he was one. The most dangerous men in the world are not the ones who feel nothing. They are the ones who feel everything, and learned to hide it to survive. Somewhere along the way, the world told them that softness was weakness, that grief was a liability, that the boy who felt things needed to be buried so the man who could endure things could stand up in his place. And so they buried him. And they built walls. And they became untouchable. And they sat, night after night, at tables set for one, wondering why, with everything they had taken and built and conquered, something still felt missing. Maybe that's not just his story. Maybe you know what it is to be told, by life, by loss, by the simple cruelty of growing up, to stop feeling so much, to toughen up, to move on, to be stronger than what broke you. And maybe it has been a long time since anyone looked at you, really looked, and said the thing you needed most to hear. So let this be that moment. Your heart is still good. Whatever you've been through, whatever it cost you, whatever you became in order to survive it, the part of you that kept a bowl of soup warm, that part is still there. It never left. It was just waiting for someone to say so. If this story stayed with you, you're already in the right place. Welcome to Tales of K-Mafia. We tell the stories Seoul keeps in the shadows. Stories about power and pain and the impossible, stubborn humanity that survives both. Subscribe, and we'll tell you another one.